Hello and welcome to the Sky Blue Times YouTube channel. Today, video on Donnarumma signing for Manchester City, the new number one replacing Ederson. Now, it's important to mention at the very start, I've seen people kind of frame this as Ederson being moved on purposely to bring in Donnarumma, whereas I think it should be quite clear to people that Ederson has that desire to go. You don't take that move that he does unless you want to get out of the club. And I think over the past 2 summers, it's been kind of obvious that that move has been coming. I think last season you kind of got that impression that one foot was out the door. And you think about Guardiola at the time not extending his contract, the idea of like, if you stay one more year for me and then you can move on the following summer, turning down a big Saudi move at the time. So I just think that's important to bear in mind. This is not Guardiola going, I need to get rid of Ederson for Donnarumma. It's Ederson did want to go. If he stayed, then you have that ideal situation of Ederson staying at number one, Trafford working his way in, being the backup, learning and developing, but still getting a good amount of minutes. Whereas now, when you see Donnarumma coming in, that gives you the pretty clear impression that they didn't view Trafford as somebody capable of being the number one immediately. I think we'll touch on a bit later where that could go with him, with that situation. And because Ederson's going, you then have that option of, right, if my number one is gone now, what do I want to do? I know I need one, and I don't feel that Trafford is able to take that step right away as much as he's had impressive moments in the opening 3 Premier League games. What direction do I want to take? And as we'll get into in this video, Donnarumma is somebody that I think if any other Premier League team signed as their new number one, I think pretty much everybody would say that's an excellent signing. Apart from Manchester City, you have that question mark over the fit with the distribution, the ball playing aspect, and how important that is to the way that Guardiola's played, or at least what we've seen from teams under Guardiola, more so Manchester City with Ederson. Although when you look at Valdez, when you look at Manuel Neuer, these are keepers that are certainly comfortable with the ball at their feet. Maybe not to the same extent as Ederson is. But yeah, that's the kind of main kind of angle I think people are coming from. And from my side of it, it's just trying to understand the move, I think, rather than me being completely opposed to it, dislike it, etc. It's more so just trying to understand why you make that move. Because really, and I think this is fair to go off, Guardiola has to approve this signing, and Xavi, the goalkeeper coach, has to approve this signing. They'll be clued up on making that move for Donnarumma. They'll be happy with that decision. So for them to make that call, but you on the outside don't understand it, don't agree with it, there's obviously a gap there in terms of what we're not understanding about why this could be a good move and why they would be happy to make that change. Now, it's pretty obvious that for a team rebuilding, you want to still have leaders in the team, you still want to have experience in the team. Goalkeepers is one of those positions that are very structural to any team, and particularly a Guardiola team, somebody that's there week in, week out. He likes to have that number one that he knows is absolutely undisputed in his place, somebody that brings a lot of experience over the course of their career. It is Ederson, as well as you've seen with Valdez, with Neuer at the clubs. This is the total league 90s played by Donnarumma, Ederson, Alisson and Neuer between 2015-16 season up to the 24-25 season. And it's cumulative across those seasons. And as you can see that Donnarumma is just ahead of Ederson for those total league 90s, ahead of Alisson, ahead of Neuer in that period. I believe Neuer had a couple of injuries, but even then, because you can see that these will be the injury seasons here where it just dips on the line. But even with that, bearing in mind, he's still going to be very close to to Donnarumma, sorry. So you've got somebody coming in at 26 that still has a vast amount of experience, the kind of experience that only really goalkeepers coming towards their 30s get. Yeah, Donnarumma's coming in his prime, and that is built on the fact that he made his debut so early on. I believe he was 16 at the time, third choice when he was coming into the Milan squad, and then by the time you got to 2016, January of the 15-16 season, he overtakes and becomes that kind of undisputed number one, gets his new contract, and off he goes. And between 16 to 21, he's played over 200 Serie A games. I believe he has the most minutes for players aged between 16 and 21. So what that would mean is the player that was aged 18, who played the most minutes at 18, who played the most minutes at 19, 20, etc. Donnarumma tops all of those. So somebody that played a hell of a lot of games when he was very young. So that is how he comes in with so much more experience. He has 70 plus caps for his national team in Italy. So something that not many players get as well. So he already comes in with that. You think that's somebody that over the course of his career is going to surpass 100 caps and maybe get between 120 up to 150, depending on how long he continues for the rest of his career. Somebody that made his debut in Serie A at 16, as I mentioned, somebody that made their national team debut at 17, somebody that idols Buffon and is at the moment on course to have the kind of career that a goalkeeper like him has had, covering so many games, such a long, lengthy career playing at the top level. So you're thinking about experience coming into the dressing room. You think about Euro 2020, saving 2 penalties in that final, being decisive in them winning that tournament. You think about the Champions League, winning the treble with PSG. Although, as we'll touch on a bit later, his shot stop in the league that season was not outstanding as you would expect. Although I think he only played 24 games, so he rotated for a lot of the, you would say, weaker opposition that would only boost his scores. So he played in those games, I'd expect him to have much better metrics. Only really played for the tougher games, but in the very toughest games that they would have played that season, when you're talking about the Champions League games, away from home, Villa Park, Anfield, the Emirates, etc., Donnarumma stood up, and you'll see countless great saves across all of those matches. He was decisive in the Anfield match, winning man of the match. Could have quite rightly had man of the match in the games against Arsenal and against Villa for the saves that he was pulling off. So you are bringing in somebody that not only has all that experience, as I mentioned, but has moments where he's proven decisive and is experiencing. So you think about somebody like Erling Haaland, who's still very young, but you think of all he's experienced for his national team, for all the clubs that he's played for, winning the treble with Manchester City. He's somebody that is just coming into their prime, but very experienced. Donnarumma is exactly the same. He's also mentioned as being quite a vocal keeper. I've seen clips of him in set pieces communicating with the rest of the team to tell him where to be. I saw one with Hakimi unsure on who he's marking, and he's telling him who he needs to mark. So you've got somebody like that as a goalkeeper compared to Ederson that wasn't as vocal with his backline, communicating with them. So that's something to bear in mind. When I was looking at different quotes from Donnarumma, there was one from him where he said the goalkeeper must be heard, command the defence for them to feel safe with me, just like I feel safe with them. They are important because of this. I trust them, they trust me, and the reciprocity is very important for all of us. As well as that, you've got that kind of focus of when he was younger, needing to stay fit. I believe 5 out of 6 seasons with AC Milan, he started 36 plus league games. Since he joined PSG in the 21-22 season, he's only missed 4 matches through injury. Ederson in that same period from 21-22 to now has missed 18 games with injury. So you're getting somebody in that is incredibly consistent with their availability, with their fitness as a goalkeeper, which you absolutely need for that position. And particularly last season with Ederson, you saw the impact of that, despite him overperforming in a lot of the shot-stopping metrics last season, facing a lot of high-quality shots, which will obviously be baked into why those numbers look so good. But there was many times where he was in and out the team with injury. You had Ortega in, then you had Ederson in. He didn't have that real consistent run throughout the whole of a Premier League season, which of course wouldn't have been helpful for the back line that was also dealing with their own injuries. That you didn't have that consistency in the goal. And that's something when I was looking up, his goalkeeper coach at AC Milan mentioned one of the important things we worked on with Donnarumma, in my opinion, was injury prevention, the support and reinforcement of the body. And he'd never picked up injuries in his career. And that started when he was 14, developed even more when he was 18. He worked a lot on this aspect. And obviously, when we're looking back at his career so far, that has proven to be the case. This is somebody that can be trusted to be reliable with their fitness throughout their career. So these are all things that are important to mention. Obviously, languages is another thing. Fluent in Italian, Guardiola fluent in Italian himself, coming from PSG where they speak a lot of Spanish with their South American players there, as well as French with the French players there. He does speak some French, he does speak some Spanish, so I wouldn't really be too concerned about that. I've seen an interview with him listening to questions in English and then replying in Italian, so I suspect that he's not comfortable speaking in English, but he does understand it to some extent. So when we're talking about him being very vocal, it's important that he also has the languages to be able to be that vocal keeper. So yeah, I don't see that being an issue, and this is just all part of the benefit of bringing Donnarumma in at this time in his career, in his prime years. He's had all those years of getting experience. He's had those years where he struggled in different seasons, where he's had to fight for his place at PSG, etc. You've had all of those years behind him, and now he's coming in as that keeper in his prime that has these great moments and wants to find that consistency for the rest of his career. So yeah, lots of really good and interesting points there. I think compared to Ederson, you've seen the kind of differences that he would bring between the two. But there's lots more to talk about. This is the 23-24 season expected save percentage with actual save percentage, and as you can see, Donnarumma pointed out here, saves 14% more shots than expected based on difficulty of shots faced. You see some of the other keepers in and around here. You've got Chevalier, who was his replacement at PSG. You've seen Alisson here, 7%. Andre Onana, 8%. Vicario, 4%. David Raya at Arsenal, who has done very well in the last couple of seasons, 1% during the 23-24 season, and that was one of the seasons Arsenal did very well, and Raya got a lot of praise. But as you can see on this metric, wasn't greatly outperforming his save percentage on there compared to what was expected. So yeah, Donnarumma did have an outstanding season, shot-stopping wise, 23-24. In the league last season, that dropped. I think he slightly underperformed in his post-shot expected goals. So that's something to bear in mind. But if you look over the course of his career, there's a couple of seasons where he slightly underperforms, and more so there are seasons where he overperforms. When I was looking at some of the numbers, so like Ederson last season, I mentioned he was, I think, career best for Premier League shot stopping. Ederson over his career, and he prevented more non-penalty goals than any other keeper, which was 6. You compare that to Donnarumma across his career, he's had at least 4 seasons with better goals prevented numbers than that. So that is Ederson reaching his career peak for shot stopping last season in terms of the underlying numbers, and a big part of that will just be the quality of shots that he was facing, as we saw with the way that City was struggling, opposition getting really good shots in the middle of the box. So that is part and parcel to those numbers. If you're pulling off these saves that are just more high value, then you're going to boost those numbers. But if we're looking over a bigger sample size, a longer career, longer set of years, with Donnarumma, then he's got 4 seasons with better goal prevented numbers than Ederson's career best. That's quite clearly the kind of trade-off that you're making by bringing in Donnarumma, although there's certainly some concerns to be had about that consistency. When you think about Champions League 23-24, that wasn't the very best version of Donnarumma, so that is somewhere you can be concerned. The league last season, somewhere you can be a little bit concerned. But then when you look at the league 23-24, as you see with this graphic here, performed very well. When you look at the Champions League last season, the away games that I was talking about, in crucial moments he did deliver. So as much as there are points to be concerned in the same exact seasons, you're seeing the flip, whether it's in the Champions League or in the league. If you look over a much bigger sample size, so since 2015, only Jan Oblak, 45.4, Bryce Samba, 41, have prevented more goals than Donnarumma, 40.6, across Europe's top 5 leagues. So if we go in a really big sample size there, he is up there as one of the best shot stoppers in Europe over the last decade, and the numbers just back that up. If we just move over to this one here, this is another view of shot stopping from that 23-24 season. You can see some of the other keepers that stood out. Areola at West Ham, Valles, who had that exceptional season with Las Palmas, Di Gregorio, that eventually made the move to Juventus. This was the season that got him that move. Andre Onana, who had a good season there. Kobol, Bissot as well, who eventually moved to Aston Villa. So you can see all these, and then you can see some of the other keepers that don't perform as well down the bottom. Somebody like Mark Flecken from the Premier League, Zetner, Paul Lopez, and some other keepers down there. But quite clearly, Donnarumma was, from the beginning all the way through that season, one of the very best at shot stopping during that season. This is the shot map, from that 23-24 season. As you can see, most of these shots are out wide, not down the middle. Somebody with the frame that Donnarumma has is just able to cover so many different angles, particularly down the middle with his reach. So you see primarily all the shots are taken really out wide. And this was the season that he overperformed quite significantly with his post-shot expected goals. So that's post-shot expected goal 27.86, 15 goals conceded, 92 shots. 3 goals conceded, 4 penalties as well. So yeah, that's pretty much that with that. Sweeping's another thing you've got to bear in mind. So this is looking at goalkeeper aggressive distance from the 23-24 season. Quite clearly there's a difference between different leagues. So when you're looking at the Bundesliga, these keepers are in general much more further off their line. Manuel Neuer up here, 23.47. You see Edison with the Premier League, 23.03. And then you see that the keepers in France, much lower on average. And then Donnarumma, 16.17. So this is not somebody that is, at least from the way he's been playing under Enrique with PSG, is not proven to be somebody that is going to be sweeping up balls, coming huge distances off his line. We actually saw in the first 3 Premier League games with James Trafford, who can sweep quite well, but his decision making wasn't entirely great, particularly in the Spurs game. So you saw instances where he was too slow to come off his line. So a lot of that really is just coming down to the decision making. But it's still important for Man City, who play a high line, who's trying to play an offside trap. So that's, again, an area to be concerned about, to have question marks about. How does he fit in? How does the team then adjust if he's not going to be a keeper capable of sweeping and covering large distances off his line to collect the ball? That's something to keep an eye on when we move into the new season and Donnarumma comes in as that expected number 1. As you're looking at his time at PSG, he averages 1.01 actions outside the penalty area, average distance 14.1 yards. Compare that to Edison at Manchester City, 1.55 actions outside his penalty area with an average distance of 17.8 yards. So you can see right there, just Edison is a lot more proactive across his time at Manchester City and comes out further compared to Donnarumma, so that's something to keep an eye on. As well as that, you're looking at touches. So over his career at PSG, League One, Donnarumma 3.7 touches in the defensive third outside of his penalty area. Edison at Manchester City, 6.9. Manuel Neuer during his time at Bayern Munich, 11.3. So if we're putting together a scale of keepers that come out off their line and are getting touches on the ball outside of the penalty area, and this will be in part due to sweeping actions and it will be in part due to being involved in the build-up, then Donnarumma's not shown, at least at his time at PSG, that this is how he's going to be playing as a goalkeeper. Then when we look at claiming crosses, is another one. So when I was looking at his time at PSG, he has averaged 0.68 crosses stopped per 90, which is 6.2% of total crosses he faced, he stopped. You compare that to Edison at Manchester City, he averages 0.55 per 90 and 6.9% of total crosses stopped. So really you're not looking at a huge difference there in terms of those numbers. But then when you're thinking about making the move to the Premier League, I expect that you're going to see an increase in crosses targeting him. And again, that will be something to keep an eye on. This is somebody that, although he's 6'5", has shown really good at getting out to punch the ball when he is decisive. He's good at claiming crosses. But he has shown across his career that he's not been as decisive in previous seasons when it comes to set pieces, corners, crosses into the box. So again, along with the sweeping, something to keep an eye on. How well will he do with that? All of it comes down to making the right decision at the right moment. At least when we're looking at the numbers, he's not up there with some of the very best at claiming crosses. If you look at Europe's top 5 leagues last season, somebody that made the move that Manchester City were linked with, Joan Garcia, has stopped the most crosses with 64. Obviously playing for Espanyol, they're putting a lot of balls into the box against a team that was close to relegation. He averaged 1.68 per 90, and that's 9.6% of total crosses stopped. If we look at the Premier League, the top 2, Martinez, 54 crosses stopped. David Raya, 53 crosses stopped. Martinez was 1.58 per 90, 11.2% of crosses stopped. David Raya, 1.39 per 90, 13.2% of crosses stopped. So that is a clear area that Arsenal looked at making an improvement with the goalkeepers compared to Aaron Ramsdale, bringing in David Raya. And when you're looking at Donnarumma coming into Man City, it's clearly not a standout part of his game that City are looking for. But if we're comparing to Ederson, it wasn't something that Ederson was outright one of the best in the league at either. So that's another angle to it. Donnarumma that season as well, as I mentioned, he didn't play very many games at all in League One compared to some of these other keepers that were close to 38 games. Part of that was PSG in all competitions, going far, Champions League, resting their players and so on. So he stopped 10 crosses that season, averaged 0.43 per 90, and that's 5% of total crosses stopped by Donnarumma last season in League One. So yeah, quite a lot there. Just to kind of round off that shot stopping angle though, that is why you're bringing in Donnarumma. So you've got somebody that with that frame likes to get low, knows he can still reach the shots up high, on his toes, ready to react, quite quick to get down, the way he kind of doesn't need to take a kind of push step, a negative step at all, to cover the distances either side or to get himself down low to the ground. So when you're thinking about some of his very best saves, that I think I've got some of the images later on. You think about some of his best saves against like Martinelli and Trossard in the Champions League, how quickly he was able to get down and get a hand to those low shots across the goal. All these kind of aspects, quick on his line and so on. That is what you're buying Donnarumma for. That's the kind of difference you're looking for him to make. You think City have never won more than one Champions League under Guardiola, despite having a phenomenal team throughout many of those years. And you think about the 23-24 season going out on penalties to Real Madrid. That's a season they absolutely could have won the Champions League. The difference was the penalties. In that round, Donnarumma over the course of his entire career, I believe, has saved 15 out of 43 penalties, and that's not including penalty shootouts, compared to Ederson saving 6 out of 55. So, along with the shot stopping, that's a clear upgrade that you're getting with bringing Donnarumma in. Compared to Ederson, you look at the Champions League last season against Liverpool in the penalty shootout, he proved decisive. You go back to Euro 2020 in the penalty shootout, he proved decisive. So these are all the kind of areas you're looking at as where you're making that trade-off, and we'll get onto the passing a bit later. But when it comes to the strengths, what you're buying Donnarumma for, those are what you're bringing him in to do. And as we'll get onto some of the things with the build-up and so on, it's important to bear in mind that you're expecting him to deliver. So this kind of trade-off does make sense to a degree, as long as he backs it up with the consistent shot stopping. So if he comes in with the ability to be a significant upgrade on Ederson, making these saves, but isn't able to find consistency, does find himself making mistakes and so on, and underperforms there, then the trade-off you're then making doesn't make as much sense as all that stuff that you're dealing with when it comes to the build-up, with him not being as much of a proactive keeper sweeping off his line, then that's going to come to the forefront a little bit more. But yeah, we'll move on and we'll touch on a little bit of that later on in the video. So this is just to give you a bit of an idea when you kind of see all the passes that Ederson makes, of the kind of impact he has. It's the passing range for me. So not only is his long passes able to get over the halfway line, but he's able to find passes into the final third. This is from the 23-24 season. Very similar over most of his years at Manchester City. You think about last season when he got 4 assists in the Premier League. I believe he has the most in a single Premier League season by a goalkeeper. 4 assists. He has the most by a Premier League goalkeeper of all time. 4 assists. So clearly this is a weapon that Manchester City were able to use over his time. Not necessarily always needed to be the guy that was making that assist, but being able to place that ball with enough of the backspin, with enough of the kind of drive on it, that you could just place it in the right spot in the final third against teams that press man to man. It's a real weapon. That with Donnarumma, you're not bringing in somebody that's unable to hit long passes, but you're somebody that could deliver those kind of passes that Ederson was able to deliver. He definitely can't do those. Coming from PSG, where you've got players like Kvaratskhelia and Dembele and Barcola, compared to somebody like Erling Haaland, you're obviously missing that proper target. And now be something to keep an eye on for Manchester City when it goes into next season. How well do they set up with the different areas they'll try and target with longer passes, with goal kicks? You think about, we saw more of Ederson on his right side, given that he's left-footed, hitting passes over here. With James Trafford, we've seen him try and hit long passes more over to this side to find Marmoush or Erling Haaland to move over to that left-hand side. Given that Trafford's right-footed, Donnarumma is also right-footed as well. Be something to keep an eye on. If they're able to set that up in the right way, then I think you'll find that there are some success found from Donnarumma in those long passes. But to have the same kind of quality of Ederson, you think about that assist for Sergio Aguero. The ball has just enough spin, just enough drive that it gets to the right distance, but it just lands nicely there for Aguero, that he's able to score that goal. He doesn't have to worry about bringing it down and so on and wasting time that the defender can get close. He's just able to arrive onto that ball and make the move to score the goal. So that kind of quality you are losing. You think about these passes out to the fullback, the way you can kind of easily, under pressure, opposition players right next to him, and he's just able to scoop these passes out to the fullback so easily. That's another thing you're missing with Ederson. Donnarumma can play these kind of chip balls out, but not to the same quality, not to the same kind of level of pressure that Ederson was under. You think about these passes between the lines to the striker as he drops, or to the pivot. Again, Donnarumma can play these passes, but to the same kind of quality, with the pace on it, under the pressure, baiting the opposition. No, he can't. So you definitely got a keeper that's able to play these different passes. It's just that the quality is not going to be there, particularly under pressure, which is just going to change how you approach it. You think about how, like when you're saying about a man-to-man system that are pressing Manchester City, always you see Guardiola say, and Ederson said this as well, I've seen other players in the City team say this, the goalkeeper is that spare man, and it's up to him to then find a space for you to put the ball into space. I saw when Ederson did his recent interview leaving, he just talks about, my job is to find a space, put the ball there, and then that's it, hands off, leave it to the striker, leave it to Haaland, Aguero, etc. Then it's on to you. I just need to find a space and put the ball there and deliver it. Now, when you're bringing in somebody like Donnarumma, you're not going to have that same advantage as Ederson, so that's going to drive some sort of change. If we move over to this one here, just to give you a bit of a comparison, this is Donnarumma in League One last season. Now, obviously the volume has dropped off. When I was looking at over his 24 matches, 23.8 passes per 90 completed. Ederson during the 23-24 season we just looked at, he started 33 games in the Premier League, averaged 31.4. So you're talking 8 more passes per game that Ederson is pulling off compared to Donnarumma. So even if Donnarumma started 33 games, obviously this graphic will fill out a lot more, but still not to the same level of Ederson. You look at the long passes, you don't have that same kind of reach into the final third that Ederson did. You look at the kind of like medium chip balls out to the fullback. As I mentioned, he can do those, but not to the same kind of the volume, the length, etc., all the way up and down that touch line. You're not seeing as much volume of passes straight through the middle into the pivots, into the striker that's dropping. And then when he is playing along, it's specifically targeting this zone on the left-hand side. And when you think about the players that they have with PSG, Barcola, Kvaratskhelia, Dembele, etc., these are not players that you're going to be able to win a lot of aerial duels and second balls off playing long into. So that's something I would say with Donnarumma, that if they can set up that correctly, then you might find he has more success here. But for the most part, you can't really be under any illusion that you are losing something with Ederson, with his playing out from the back by moving on to Donnarumma. That's the kind of most obvious way to kind of show the trade-off between the two. Is just talking about the distribution. This is a really interesting one from The Athletic, comparing the goal kicks and then the open play passes. So if you look at Ederson here, a lot of passes all over the pitch, primarily for goal kicks. Donnarumma last season since 21-22, primarily playing inside his own penalty box. Two players that would drop in there. You think about PSG with Vitinha moving inside the box to pick up the ball off Donnarumma from the goal kick, and they build out deep from the back. compared to Ederson. You think about all these passes, in particular from the goal kicks. If you just look at the final third, as I mentioned a bit earlier, you've got 1% here for Donnarumma, but then you look at all of these areas Ederson's able to find into the final third. So you're just losing that proper passing range that he has. And that same kind of thing extends to the open play passes. So you still see a lot of passes inside the box, 13% and 9% either side of Donnarumma. Ederson, 4% either side. So Ederson is looking to play outside of his penalty box. So yeah, I think it's really quite evident the difference there. Final thing to mention is just that little bit of inclination towards the left from Donnarumma. Ederson, 50% either side. Open play and goal kicks evenly distributed. Donnarumma, whether it's open play, whether it's goal kicks, slightly leans towards his left side in terms of his distribution. So yeah, when we're kind of looking at both of those, the distribution and the shot stopping, that is your most kind of obvious way of looking at the trade-off that you're making. If we're looking at Manchester City over recent years, when I was looking at Ederson last season in particular, it's the first season he's faced over 3 shots on target per 90 in his City career. First time he's averaged more than 2 saves per 90. Conceded more than a goal a game, 1.01. His post-shot expected goal on average at Manchester City was 0.9 per 90. Last season it was 1.16. So there is truth to say that the kind of balance is tipping more towards needing a better shot stopper in goal. So when you have that opportunity to bring somebody in, you're looking at maybe, shot stopping is a bit higher up on your list compared to the distribution angle that you would have been looking at in previous years. I think there's another kind of important point to make is if you're going to lose somebody that's outstanding as a ball-playing goalkeeper, as we've seen with some of these numbers here, that don't do them properly justice, but give you a little bit of an idea. If you're going to lose somebody that's outstanding as a ball-playing goalkeeper, then you want to bring somebody in that is outstanding at something else. You could bring in a goalkeeper that's going to be good, because we know no goalkeeper is going to be like Ederson. So you could bring in another goalkeeper that's good with his feet. But if he's good with his feet and then good with his shot stopping but not outstanding, is there maybe room you've left on the table there where if you've gone for somebody like Donnarumma, let's bring in somebody that we know at his very best. He's shown it last season. He's shown it in many seasons across his career. Although there may be some arguments with the consistency, he has shown he can be outstanding as a shot stopper. Can we bring him in, mitigate his weaknesses, instead of bringing in somebody that is good as a ball-playing goalkeeper, is good at their shot stopping, but not at the very best level? That's another way to look at it. That City have gone down. I think it's important to mention that this is a signing, I think I said at the start, but this is somebody that Guardiola has liked for a long time. When he was playing with Milan when he's 16 years old, Guardiola went to watch matches with him before Ederson came into Manchester City. Donnarumma was one of the top goalkeepers, if not the top of the list, that Guardiola wanted to join him when he moved from Bayern Munich to Manchester City as that first choice goalkeeper. So there's definitely a lot of admiration there for Guardiola's point of view. You'd imagine that when he was very young, you had that kind of idea of, if he's 16 and he's this good at all of these things, then when it comes to playing out from the back, I can teach him that. He's got so many years to learn. So you've got that angle. Now we've seen his career. You haven't seen that kind of development that you'd expect. So when he comes into City, I think it's valid to have some concern over how they manage that. But then if we look at, so this is just some of the examples, this is what you are getting. These are saves that I'm not convinced Ederson would be able to make. They are the saves that stop the swing of momentum in the favour of another team. You think about how when City played Brighton, they weren't particularly bad, they weren't particularly great, but that penalty swings that momentum completely into Brighton's favour. When you're playing in the Champions League, we've seen time and time again for Manchester City in seasons where they haven't been successful, matches where a goalkeeper not making that vital save has then swung the momentum for the opposition team. So that is what you are buying. Somebody that, as I mentioned a bit earlier, on their toes, is able to cover the shots above his head, knows his angle really, really well. And when I was looking at videos of him discussing his saves, he was talking all the time. He was talking about positioning himself in the right place, knows his frame. He just needs to be in the right position and anticipate and wait for the right moment to make his move. And that's the kind of basis of his goalkeeping with his shot stopping ability. So yeah, this is what you're gaining. And then if we move on to some of these other ones, this is the other one by Martinelli. Again, another excellent save. This one by Martin Odegaard, shot on the edge of the box. Does tremendously well to get down low and save that. And then some of the other things I mentioned about City coming last season, facing more and more shots. But there's a lot of things that we just don't know. So if you think about the way that the team builds up at the moment, compared to PSG, very dynamic, mobile midfield, crisp passing and so on. Manchester City's build-up's not that yet. So you're going to have question marks on what they're going to do. If you look at when we play teams that are going to press us very high versus not, the teams that are not going to press us high, they're going to sit in their low block. You think about Forest away last season. You think about Everton at home as well last season. There are games where if a goalkeeper was able to make that decisive save, we pick up a point against Forest and we pick up the win against Everton. So in those kind of games, playing out from the back is not important. It's just going to be give it to your defender who's going to carry it 20, 30 yards up the pitch towards where the opposition have camped in their low block. So the distribution doesn't matter there, but can Donnarumma make those vital saves in the game? Because we know at some point the opposition will get one or two moments, one or two good chances. Can you be decisive and make those saves? So that is what you're expecting from him in those type of games where Ederson may have fallen short. In the teams that press us high, this is then going to be swung onto not only are these games where your strengths really should show up even more. So when you think about when PSG played Liverpool at Anfield, although this is not a game that he's expected to play out from the back, it is the game where he has to make important saves, and he did do that throughout that match. And then for the team, it's on them to find another way. And that's really is a big unknown as we go into the season. Do you do more of kind of vacate the middle and long balls and so on? Do you do something a bit more like what PSG did, what Brighton did, what De Zerbi did with Marseille, that kind of De Zerbi build-up of like really deep first line, bit by bit, using timings and so on to slowly work your way up the pitch. That's a lot of the kind of question marks that we do have that we just don't know about, but it's obvious that they'll have to find another way to progress. I mentioned the Liverpool video throughout the Liverpool game throughout this. If you remember back to that game, Liverpool started with very aggressive high press. They were trying to really get on top of and take advantage of the struggles of Donnarumma with his feet, and PSG wanting to play out from the back, and the build-up success rate was quite low in that kind of initial 10 to 15 to 20 minutes. They tried to use Vitinha drop deep inside the penalty box for the goal kicks. But all that meant was it was easier for Liverpool's high press to target them because you're just putting more of your kind of small technical players in the way of that high press. So then Enrique moved Vitinha back into midfield, which then meant if you're Szoboszlai, you're going, do I commit to the high press or do I pick up Vitinha who's just gone behind me? So you then have a decision to make there. And then you have the decision of Liverpool to continue with that high press. And then Dembele would drop from the back line into the space between the lines, behind the midfielders, behind the high press, in front of the centre-backs. The centre-backs weren't willing to close the space between the line and go with. So then you suddenly have a Vitinha there in midfield that's free. Szoboszlai has to decide, do I pick him up, do I not? You then have Dembele between the lines who's free. Do I pick him up, do I not? And this is how PSG began to solve that problem of the high press. Rather than it being dependent on my goalkeeper as a spare man, that is my solution. They had to find different ways to do it. So there was also, you had Salah who was trying to curve his run in front of Nuno Mendes to then press Donnarumma. So instead of what Nuno Mendes would do is he'd take his touch in front of Salah. So Salah would go in front of Nuno Mendes towards Donnarumma. Donnarumma plays that quick pass into Nuno Mendes. He still has Salah right next to him coming. And instead Nuno Mendes takes that first touch forward and then he has the whole pitch that opens up to him to then play forward passes. On the other side, with Marquinhos and Hakimi, they were playing their passes from Donnarumma, was going straight into Marquinhos, which then meant that Hakimi was free because Diaz just had to jump straight away. Again, these are all little things, just kind of like brief explanations, but little things that they do to get around the fact that Liverpool are pressing high and to try and find these different solutions, not just because you've got the goalkeeper that can do the job that Ederson can do. So you are making that trade-off. You are wanting the shot stopping of Donnarumma that across that Champions League run he did show. He needs to deliver that consistently, and that's a valid thing to be concerned about and to keep an eye on. And then it's on you as the team to be able to find the different solutions in the build-up, under pressure, to progress in those type of games. And when you're talking about a team like Guardiola manages in Manchester City, you'd expect that they're going to be able to find those solutions deep with the kind of players that they brought in. You think about Reinders, you think about Cherki, you've got Rodri there, Nico Gonzalez, Bernardo Silva. You've got lots of technical midfielders. It's about getting them to be more dynamic, more mobile with their kind of rotations, and also to be nice and crisp with their passing. And that's the other area you need to keep an eye on, and how well the team does if they want to progress with Donnarumma. They're the kind of like two sides of it. If we're going to be successful with this move, you need him to be consistent with his shot stopping. You need City to figure out the build-up without Donnarumma to be consistent, crisp with their passing, dynamic in their movement, etc. We've seen in an open few games the way that Reinders is slowly adjusting to the Premier League, Cherki slowly adjusting to the Premier League. So it's definitely fair on either side for him to be consistent with shot stopping, but also for City to be perfect with the build-up. Is a stretch early in this season, early into this kind of rebuild phase of Manchester City. But yeah, that is ultimately the trade that you are making. You are banking on him delivering the shot stopping in the crucial moments in the Champions League to pick up points in the Premier League, and that under Pep Guardiola he can find the solutions in the build-up to not need to use the goalkeeper quite like what he did with Ederson. But yeah, that's pretty much kind of like general thoughts on it. Just wanted to do a video talking through all those different points, some of the stats and so on. As I mentioned at the start of the video, I don't think it's a move you can be too, like, you can't really plant your flag either side, in my opinion. I think Donnarumma has shown to be an outstanding shot stopper. He's shown just last season on a team that plays very technical positional play football, fluid football, that he could win the treble with that team. So you've got that on one angle. You just can't ignore that. But when you're looking at City, when you're looking at a team that is not perfect in their build-up, is not crisp with their passing, it's coming from a system that use Ederson as that kind of vocal point in the build-up, there's definitely lots of valid questions to be had, as well as the kind of further points of Donnarumma with his sweeping, with his claiming crosses and so on, to think, okay, he needs to be consistent with that. But yeah, we'll see. Intriguing move for me. I think it's just really interesting to see the way this plays out. And my final point, just to mention, is this is a clear sign to me of people doubted him before that Guardiola is very open to new ideas, very open to change. We've seen that with the coaching staff. And to bring in a goalkeeper like this really is another sign for that. If you have any questions, let me know down below. If you have any comments, things I've missed out, so on, let me know down below. I'll jump in with the replies and talk to you on that. Make sure you like the video to help support the channel. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on the next video. And we'll be back with more content this week.